Hello and welcome back to STM's Crime and Paranormal Podcast. It is your host Ashley, and today we are going to talk about a murderer down in Harris County, Texas. His name is Rex Warren Mays. He was born January 21st of 1960 in Harris County, Texas. He actually murdered two girls by the name of Kristin Wiley and Kainara Carrero. So July 20th of 1992, it was summer vacation in Houston, Texas. The last 2 summers, Jeremy and Kristin would sign up for programs at the local YMCA, while Kip Wiley, whom was the father of Kristin and stepfather of Jeremy, and Rebecca, whom was the mother of Jeremy, would work so that they were still under adult supervision. So the kids would go to the YMCA and do the local program there during the summertime, so adults were still watching them. But in the year of 1992, Jeremy was now finally 14 years old, and the Wileys had decided that they could give Jeremy a little bit more responsibility. He's 14 years old. He should, be able to stay at home by himself. So the couple had agreed that Jeremy was now mature enough to stay in their 4-bedroom home while both the parents were working for the summer of 92. He was able to go to a friend's house as long as he would call his mother or his stepfather before he left, and he was supposed to keep an eye on Kristin. So Kristin Wiley and Kainara Carrero were best friends. The night before July 20th in 1992, Kristin had slept over at Kainara's house, and that was just down the street from her house. So they lived in the same neighborhood. Kainara lived with her mother named Diane Taylor and her stepfather. Kristin and Kainara, would often help each other do their chores. So Kristin would go to Kainara's and help her with her chores, and then Kainara would come over to Kristin's and help with Kristin's chores. So earlier in the afternoon of July 20th of 1992, Diane Taylor would send the 2 girls over to the Wiley's house so they could clean their home, which is Kristin's parents. It was around 2 o'clock in the afternoon when Jeremy would call his mother to ask if he could go across the street to his friend's house. His friend's name was Doug McCormick. So at this time, both girls were already at the Wiley house. They were doing their cleaning with music blaring on the radio so they could hear over the vacuum. So I don't know about you guys, but I listen to loud music as I'm cleaning because I don't want to hear the vacuum and I need some motivation. So they were listening to music very loudly. It stated that it was Christian music, but I couldn't exactly find exact details on that. And it really doesn't matter. So Jeremy would then leave the home with his Nintendo and a fan. There's around 8 other boys that were from the neighborhood that would play video games in the McCormick's hot garage, which is why Jeremy brought his fan. So for the next hour or so, all the boys would be playing a game called Street Fighter 2. And at one point, Jeremy would actually go back to the house to check on the girls and then return back to the McCormick's garage with the other boys. So around 3:45 in the afternoon, when all the boys were starting to get tired of playing and watching the game, so Jeremy would take his Nintendo and his fan, and then he would start heading back home. A few of his friends would actually go to his house with him so Jeremy could call and check in with his parents. His friends would wait on the porch while he went in. So Jeremy walked through their living room and would yell out for his sister Kristin. He would yell, quote, "Kristin, y'all better get in here and clean this mess up," unquote. Neither of them would respond. So Jeremy goes to his room, and when he goes into his room, he finds both girls lying face down on his bed, soaked in blood. The girls only had a t-shirt on, and each one had been stabbed multiple times. Both girls were stabbed in the eyes and were nude from the waist down. Autopsy would reveal that the girls died from stabs to the neck and head and had suffered vaginal trauma, although no semen was found. So Jeremy would then run out of the house and yelled that his sister was dead, and he would beg for his friends to come inside to help him. Jeremy would take one of the boys would actually go into the house with Jeremy. So Jeremy would take one of the boys into the house. But he soon ran out of the house as soon as he seen the two girls. Like, he seen them and he ran out. Another two boys then would go in the house. The first ran in again, thinking that he had completely forgotten to check and see if the girls could possibly still be alive. But once he reached the door entering the bedroom, he could not make himself go in there. Jeremy would then turn Kayanara over and yell to the other boys. He would then call 911 and then his mother, Rebecca. So Rebecca would arrive within minutes of Jeremy calling her. She was actually following the ambulance that was headed towards her home. And Rebecca Wiley would then go knock on Diane Taylor's door, which was Kayanara's mother. And Diane actually remembers walking down the street with her newborn baby and seeing so many police cars outside of the Wiley's residence. So officials would not let Diane in the house, and she would beg them to please just tell her if her daughter was alive. Unfortunately, a paramedic would finally answer her and tell her, "No, ma'am, she's not." So by now, a full investigation is now going on. But it gets a bit hindered by Wiley's next door neighbor. In the first few hours of finding the girls murdered. So the neighbor would give investigators descriptions of suspects that just didn't exist. So he hindered the investigation and would make up these suspects, and they never existed. So they were looking for somebody that never was ever in the house or was even around the neighborhood. The police would believe right from the beginning that whoever did murder the two girls was someone that the girls had known. It is stated that when emergency personnel had arrived, Mays, so Rex Warren Mays, who was 32 years old, was in his driveway, sitting on a lawn chair and drinking a soda. He would allow the children's mother to use his phone and would invite some deputies inside of his house for something to drink. So after 3 days, this neighbor, which was Rex Mays, would fail 2 polygraph tests and finally had admitted to investigators that he had lied about the 2 men he had seen when he told them that one was black and the other Hispanic, and that they had climbed over his fence just before the 2 girls were found. So Rex would tell detectives that he actually didn't get a good look at the Hispanic, but would help a police artist come up with the composite of the black suspect, which in turn would then become the main focus of the investigation. So after this, Rex was now being looked at as a main suspect because he lied. So after Rex Mays' landlord of over a year had found out that he had lied about the suspects, the landlord would then ask Mays to move out of the home on Fair Forest, which he had been renting for just over a year. Dane Sever, who was Rex's landlord at the time, would notice a spot that had looked like blood in the hallway near the bathroom once Mays had moved out. Detectives would have already searched this house twice, once when Mays was living there and another when he had moved out, but somehow this spot of blood was missed by detectives. Dane Sever would then contact the police, but they would not come out to examine this spot found on the wall for another 3 weeks. So there was an anonymous call that would tell investigators just days after the murder that they could find the murder weapon beside a deep drainage ditch that had ran behind the houses on the side of Fair Forest. However, it was never searched by detectives. Kayanara's father, Bob Carrero, and stepfather, Pat Taylor, would then organize searches and would later find a steak knife on the edge of the bayou near the Taylor's house. The detectives would then say that it could have been the murder weapon, but at this point, there was no way to tell, being there was no blood or fingerprints found on it. Mays had went through a number of jobs. So Mays was a clown, and he had actually, and when I say clown, I mean he was actually a clown. He was the clown. On July 20th, he had actually been fired. So the day that the two girls were murdered, he had been fired from his job with the company under contract to Exxon. So being a prime suspect in this case, but not having enough evidence to arrest Rex, there was a detective by the name of Bob Valero of the Harris County Sheriff's Department that would try to solve this case over the next year and a half. He would actually befriend Mays, and he would go out drinking with him, going to topless clubs, and would let Rex accompany him on official business, hoping that if he would create a bond with Mays, that it would eventually lead to a confession. So Detective Bob Valerio was indeed correct. And on February 10th of 1994, Detective Valerio would then ask Rex Mays to come to his office so they could discuss the case of the two girls. They would end up talking for 4 hours at this point. This is where Mays would now give his statement on what happened to Kristin and Kayanara on July 20th of 1992. Mays would actually write a written statement that he had just been fired from his job earlier that day. He stated he had decided to park a few houses down from his home so he could think of how he was going to tell his wife that he had lost his job yet again. Another job that he has lost. So once he got near the Wiley's house, he would hear the loud music blaring from the home in an upstairs bedroom. So the music that the girls were listening to while they were cleaning. Rex would then open the unlocked front door and he would call out for Kristin. He walked through the house and seen that Kristin and Kayanara was running away from him. He would then follow the two girls and ask them to turn down their stereo. Well, Kayanara would reply, quote, "No, we're not going to turn it down, just get out of the house," unquote. So Rex states after that he had suddenly got so angry because in his words, quote, "Here I had just gotten fired and some kids telling me no," unquote. So he began stabbing the two girls with a knife that he had gotten from the kitchen. He said that he had killed the girls using techniques that he had learned when he was in the Marines. However, he would not confess to sexually assaulting the girls. So he slit their carotid, I think is the word, arteries, causing them to drown in their own blood. And he said he stabbed them in the eyes to prevent them from looking at him. He stabbed Kristin Wiley 18 times and Kayanara Carrero 23 times. He stated that at first he exited the house by crawling through a window, but just as he was about to climb the fence, so the fence went to his backyard. He had suddenly remembered that he had parked down the street So he would go back into the Wiley's house through the same window that he exited out of, and then would walk out the front door instead. So once he got to his car, he would place the knife in his shirt that was covered in blood inside of a duffel bag. He then drove home, told his wife about being fired, and would then take a shower to wash the blood off that he has splattered all over his legs. My question kind of is did his wife see the blood splatter on his legs? Because I know if my husband came in the house with blood all over him, I would definitely be asking questions. The day after, Rex would then wash his bloody clothes, throw the knife he used to stab the two girls into a ravine, and place his duffel bag in the garage. So the blood from Rex May's laundered clothes would actually reveal DNA that would be linked back to the girls, so the victims. Oddly, Rex had no previous criminal history. He would be analyzed by Alan Brantley, whom was an FBI behavioral analyst, and he would testify against Mays, stating that he would be a threat to society. So Mays would state that children would cause strong emotional responses of anger and sexuality, which is what would make him to continue to be a threat to society. It is said that Mays had been dropping hints to investigators since Christmas of 1993. A person that was actually familiar with Mays would state that he thought Mays' confession was not a matter of conscience, but instead was a matter of convenience. This person would say, quote, "Mays is unemployed, again, and his wife left him, again," unquote. This person did want to remain anonymous and also said, quote, "He's a loser and he's running out of places and people to use," unquote. So when Mays would confess about the murders, he would tell investigators where the knife could be found, which was exactly where it was found earlier, if they would have looked whenever they should have. It took 19 months for the arrest of the two girls' murder. Kainar's father, Bob Carrero, would soon become a victim advocate. Bob would say that him and other advocates would keep a close eye on the case. Bob had believed all along that Rex was who had murdered these two girls. After he would give his false statements to authorities, that's when Bob was like, nope, I believe this guy it's the guy that murdered my daughter and her friend. Bob was told Mays was actually afraid of him and said that him and his friends would follow Mays constantly and pass by Mays' house while they were on their motorcycles. So they were bikers. They would even follow Mays to events where he would perform as Uh-oh, the clown. And he would even approach a woman that Mays had been dating to tell her that he believed he was the guy that had murdered his daughter and her friend. So Bob actually was approaching people and letting them know what he thought and what he had thought about Rex. Bob would constantly watch Mays, which would cause Mays to change his appearance quite a few times, and he would start using his actual first name, which was Randy, instead of Rex. So on April 1994, Mays was indicted for capital murder in the 176th District Court of Harris County, Texas. Mays would plead not guilty, and his trial would begin on September 5th of 1995. So on September 12th of 1995, the jury would find Mays guilty. September 18th of 1995, the trial court would then decided that his punishment was going to be the death penalty. So Mays would continue to appeal the court's decision, but ultimately he would be denied all of his appeals. In February of 1997, the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals remanded the case to go back to trial for a finding that regarded the admissibility of Mays' written confession. After the court filed the findings, the Court of Criminal Appeals would affirm the conviction and death sentence in October 1998. So while on death row, he would decline any request for interviews. He just didn't want to be interviewed. Mays would, however, seek pen pals on a site that was for death row inmates, and his search for pen pals would read, "My name is Rex Mays. I am 41 years old, 5'9" tall, blue-eyed, divorced, white male. I am presently on Texas death row. Interest: meeting people and writing poetry. Hobbies: clowning and listening to country music. Likes: happy people, smiling faces, anything pertaining to the country. Dislikes: judgmental people, disrespectful people. I am looking for someone who is not afraid to express their feelings, someone who likes to write and share their life through letters, someone to build a friendship with." If you are interested in building this kind of friendship/relationship, please do not hesitate to write. Hope to hear from you soon. Sincerely, Rex Mays. One of Mays' last statements was, quote, "I'm ready to go," unquote. He said, quote, "I'm going to a better place. I'm just mad for one reason. I'm going to a better place and y'all have to go through this hell on earth," unquote. He would also say a long prayer that he would request, and this is the prayer. It goes, "Forgiveness for the ones that need to be forgiven. Dear Lord, I ask you right now to be with each of," which was his personal witnesses, "and lift them up and be on solid ground." He would say, "I am going to see Jesus tonight and reserve a special place for each one of you. Just remember the good things and not the bad." He would make no eye contact with 6 of the family members of the victims that was there when he was being executed, but he would turn to the warden and say, quote, "Let me make parole and I'm ready to go home to the Lord," unquote. And as he was being lethally injected at 6:11 p.m. on September 24th of 2002, he coughed out once and let out a long sputter, but was then pronounced dead at 6:19 p.m. Sadly, Mays never apologized to the families of the 2 girls that he brutally murdered. He just never apologized to them. Rex Mays was the 51st murderer to be executed in the U.S. in 2002. He was the 800th murderer to be executed in the U.S. since 1976. The 27th murdered to be executed in Texas in 2002. And the 283rd murderer to be executed in Texas since 1976. So that was the statistics of executions and where he stood on being executed. So that is the murder of Kristin and Kayanara. 2 young girls, didn't deserve it. All they were doing was they were being good kids, listening to music, cleaning houses. Like, you don't get kids to do that. So they were very good girls. I can't wrap my head around why he would do such a thing. I know he got fired, but that was no reason to go in and murder these 2 innocent little girls that were doing nothing wrong. If anything, they were doing everything right. They were just good kids. I mean, cleaning, listening to music, being innocent, being a child. And here Rex is mad that he got fired and the girls told him to leave the house and that they weren't going to turn their stereo off. And he stabs them over it. It's sick. It's terrible. And I don't know anybody else's views on death row, but I am all for it. And he got what he should have got. I hope that the parents are dealing with everything as best as they can. I don't know how good you can deal with something like that, but I definitely have them on my mind because this case really struck me whenever I read it, and just the brutality of it and the reasoning behind it was asinine. I don't know, it stuck with me. And this case was actually recommended to me by a girl named Sam. She lives in Texas also. And she recommended this case to me. And as I was reading it, I was blown away. I hadn't heard of this one. So, anyways, thank you, Sam, for recommending this case to me. And that will be all for today. So, have a good day, a good morning, a good night, wherever you are in this world. Stay safe, and we will see you on the next episode. Thank you.